Hey, Jim. Let's kick it on the NAIA side of things. Finish it off here. Not as much football played this week, Matt, huh?
Yeah. We had the little play-in phase of the playoffs, so
Yeah.
obviously there are only 4 games to go over, and honestly, a couple of these there wasn't really close. So
Yeah.
a little boring to talk about, but there was still some good football played, and ultimately, like these are still some incredible teams. So I guess we'll kind of start out from the widest disparity
Okay.
in
Okay.
score. St. Thomas absolutely rolled over Reinhardt 55-7. St. Thomas absolutely just was living in Reinhardt's backfield. It was absolutely absurd. And offensively, Rontavious Farmer, the running back, had almost 200 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. Was just an absolute monster mowing down a very good Reinhardt defense. Like it was just wasn't even close.
Yeah. No, that was especially we talk about playoff football too. You only have 4 games, and for one of them to be in this fashion, you look at the box score, and it is just row after row after row after row. St. Thomas just blowing up the scoreboard. That's tough. Was that expected at all from this Reinhardt squad that we've seen play in some really competitive games throughout the year? Was that expected, or is this a little more of a surprise?
This is a bit more of a surprise. I
I
knew
thought
St.
so.
Thomas was going to be really, really good, and
Okay.
like no discredit to them, but nobody expected them to roll like they have been rolling this
Yeah.
season. Um, like that tough, like out of conference they had at the beginning of the season obviously worked out for them well because they are on fire. And Reinhardt too, I think maybe a little weaker than they have been in years past when they get to the playoff. But still like a very good defense, a very well coached team, very talented team. Was definitely surprised to see how uh, kind of how much of a blowout it was, truthfully.
Yeah, and it sucks too because we talk about how selective, even though you expand the field, right? Obviously the field itself is still very selective. Um,
Mhm.
and I think the best example I used earlier was like, um, Minnesota Duluth watching Mankato get their butt kicked in the first round, where like you
Yeah.
just beat them the week before, and now you're sitting
Yeah.
watching it on your couch. Like that has to hurt. So I know there's definitely a few teams out there that see a beat down like this and have to be thinking to themselves like, we could have given them a better match. Hey, we will literally never know, because they did have it felt like some pretty quality wins. That the Bluefield game they won just a week prior was super dominant. The
Mhm.
wins against Pikeville and Double OT and Georgetown was probably maybe one of their biggest wins on the year, back in week 4 of the season. So for them to have those statement wins on their record and be in a lot of those games, even on the road, to me at least was surprising. But
Yeah, absolutely. But it just goes to show how scary St. Thomas is right
yeah,
now. I would
yeah.
not want to get in their way right now. That's for sure.
For sure. How
Um,
about little GPAC shout out? Dort getting the
Dort,
job done, man, in a very big way too, huh?
yeah, the Iowa Bowl
There you go.
was
Yeah.
yeah because they both run the ball and wear black and yellow.
That's good. That's
Ended
good.
ended in favor of the actual team from Iowa, Dort.
Yes.
Obviously, Ottawa. We talked about kind of in the playoff preview the spot that they were in, being a 6-5 team. People didn't think much of this Ottawa squad. I will give them credit where credit is due. They battled well, and like I think the score doesn't show. The game was a little closer than the score
Yeah.
leads to believe, but ultimately, like Dort just out physical Ottawa. Like that's what it comes down to, and obviously they hung in there well, but this is a Dort team that just absolutely will roll you over. And their running back had 4 touchdowns, like 110 rushing yards, which is a really
Yeah.
weird stat line, but still very dominant. Um, it was just all Dort all day, and this is a team since the Morningside game that has been legit, and they continue to be.
Yeah, and I'm watching these clips too, and watching the rushing attack, and it's like, yeah, the offensive line is getting great push off the line of scrimmage. Obviously, when you run the ball like that, that's a huge part of it. But how about the dudes on the outside as well? And oh, here's I get the celebration on here too. But how about the dudes on the outside? I feel like certainly deserve some credit too from that defender squad. I feel like they contribute a lot to that rushing attack for Dort,
Mhm.
and certainly don't want to let that go unnoticed. And you talk about a team like this in the GPAC. This is probably the best example of a team that's going to benefit from this expanded field because now they have all the opportunity in the window in the world to go in and make some real noise on the old playoff kind of picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a team that I don't think was in question after they beat Morningside, wouldn't
Yeah,
have been in
very
that
true.
spot. But this is definitely the best that we've seen, and certainly that I've seen, even on the sideline watching them desperately as an offensive player, not able to do anything about what they were doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a really good Dort team.
Absolutely, dude. We talked about that Baker game a little bit before we got on, and they kind of ran away with that one, huh? Okay, that pretty convincing. 56-28 over a Louisiana Christian squad that I think you've been pretty high on.
Yeah, I've been really high on this Louisiana Christian squad. And honestly, the scoreboard, I think, here also doesn't do the game justice more so
Okay.
than the last one. The score was 35-28 at the start of the fourth quarter. Uh, you turn the ball over 2 or 3 times.
At the start of the fourth, huh? One
Yeah,
score game.
one score game at the start of the
Man.
fourth. And Louisiana Christian was fighting back, like they were very much in the game. And then, I have sung the praises of, I believe, Palermo. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's been great this year, but just some of those interceptions, they're gonna kill you, and they obviously did. Baker spilled blood in the water. It was over.
Yeah, and Louisiana Christian, they opened up the first 2 scores of the game too, so it wasn't like they were having to battle back into this one. They had a little bit of an early advantage, and that's on the road too, to open up with 2 scores and to get points on the board on the first couple of your possessions. I feel like is usually a really good indicator of a team that's going to see success down the stretch. Just the wheels fell off in the fourth quarter, huh?
Absolutely, but I think too, you have to give Baker so much credit here.
Giving
This
their
is
flowers for sure.
Yeah, this is a squad that has battled all season long and has been honestly really impressive. Just no quit, just keep rolling the way that they're rolling right now. Like they very much could make noise even as one of the lower seeds in the playoff. So
I love it, dude. Finally, we get to talk about a little bit of an upset. I would assume it. I mean, it's definitely an upset, right on the road or what?
yeah, I'd say so. I think
Okay.
too, Dickinson State doesn't get a lot of credit. They usually don't win these games, but
Okay.
for the first time since 2018, they win the first round matchup. So good for them. Obviously,
At Montana Tech, a team that has
on the
showed a
road.
lot of people up over there in the frontier, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a good sign for this Dickinson State squad. Their defense is absolutely incredible this year. Just to slow down Montana Tech the way that they did. I think both teams. This is obviously a close game. Both teams played very well, but just seeing that next gear that Dickinson State can kick it into is nice to see, and we haven't seen in years past.
Yeah, dude, this again, watching the clips here, like the venue absolutely packed over there at Montana Tech. This obviously means a lot to that fan base and that community, but at the end of the day, just not enough time. Not enough time for them to come back in this one. And I think you kind of touched on it. The takeaways, like any game, the takeaways were huge in this one against the Dickinson State team that was not afraid to take shots down the field. You see it
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
They blow it open offensively. And to me, it just screams like confidence, right? This is a very confident team that we're seeing right now. And this time of the year, that can be pretty dangerous.
It can be. And I think the North Star, for as much crap as that conference gets, just because, schools dropping out and strength of the actual teams that are in there, they've been pretty solid this year. And I think like Dickinson State has a legitimate shot to make some noise and put some respect to a conference that's probably not going to survive realignment, I guess, for the NAIA.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be curious. There's a whole lot that plays into it, but basically the North Star, because Presentation College dropped, football, Iowa Wesleyan went under, just a lot of teams that could not fund, and then Waldorf joined the GPAC. They're going to be in the GPAC next year. So,
Okay, that I actually did not know.
yeah,
Okay.
that was a recent development because Jamestown is going to be moving up to D2.
I did see that. I saw the Jamestown news for sure.
Yeah, so that was a corresponding move for the GPAC. But yeah, the North Star is, they don't get an automatic bid, so they're going to have to figure out the situation elsewhere. As of right now, it looks like a couple teams or all of them are going to join the Frontier or look at getting the GPAC, stuff like that. So
where's Jamestown going conference wise? Do we know that?
They, I believe, are going to the North Star or NSIC.
NSIC?
Yeah.
That sounds right. No, that sounds right, actually. Yeah.
Is it the North Star?
Northern Sun.
Northern Sun. That's right.
Yeah.
I always get it confused with the
I don't blame you at all. Yeah. But no, that's a fun move, actually. I forgot that's where they were going. Okay, cool. Very cool. Talk about some of these second round matchups we got. Obviously going to have thankfully, a lot more football to be played, at least on the NAI side of things, which is That's backwards as hell, by the way,
Yeah.
playoff wise, to have more football played in week 2.
Yeah, obviously with the play-in format that they're going with, expanding from 16 to 20,
Uh,
we now go from 4 games round 1 to 8 games in round 2. But obviously there's still some great matchups here, and it's important to note, I don't know D2, D3 how this really works in terms of seating. These schools a lot of the time, in kind of the corners of the country, cannot afford to be
Travel,
making
yeah.
huge trips and travel. So the seating's not even, like, it's not a traditional one plays 16, two plays 15, like that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Um, but they do the best that they can. They take into consideration distance and competitiveness factors and everything into these decisions. So the seating's going to be weird. So you just kind of have to bear with that. But
Yeah, and technically on the D2 side of things, it's like it's seeded like, correctly for the most part, but
yeah,
then you see matchups like a Grand Valley and Ferris that play in the first round, and you're like, should that really be a first round game, or was there something on beforehand that went on to say, hey, let's make travel a bit easier for whatever teams, and we want to have whatever? I think it happens still, even though it might not happen on the back end. I think it happens beforehand at the D2 level at least. But it's a very valid point, like you said. It's not, it ain't cheap to bus, or even, now you're talking about potentially flying out a group of 100 dudes. You got to stay in hotel. You got to feed a bunch of girl and boys over there.
yeah, and you don't have the A&M oil money flying around
No,
at these
hell no.
NAIA schools, so there's a lot to consider. So I think they still did a pretty good job with these matchups. It's going to be very obvious, like, which teams are regional and which ones are not.
Yeah.
But we do kick things off with the battle for Walmart, Northwestern versus
Hell
Dordt,
yeah. I was waiting for
1
it.
versus 16. Coming back, obviously Northwestern won this game pretty handily at the beginning of the year, but Dordt gets another shot at it. And this is a Dordt team that, like I said, is rolling right now.
Mm,
They can make some noise, but Northwestern, man,
yeah.
that's a tough squad.
Still a cut above.
Yeah, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. But then obviously Grandview playing Dickinson State. This is actually a really interesting matchup. Curious to see how Dickinson State's defense can handle what Grandview does on the offensive side of the ball. They have some very talented guys. But obviously Grandview's defense is so dominant. It's going to be hard to get going if you're Dickinson State. You really got to bring your A game to that one. That's a 2 versus 14 matchup.
Yeah, and if you talk about their defense in this last game, a great way to get into that is obviously disrupting what you can do in the offensive backfield, but also generating the turnovers. So I think for the most part, actually starts with the disruption. So if they can continue and pick up right where they left off, which is much easier said than done, especially against an opponent like Grandview. But if they can continue to break that up offensively and get back there and disrupt defensively and generate some of those turnovers, that's how you find those games to be way too competitive when it comes to the third and fourth quarter. So there's a recipe there. Whether or not they follow the instructions, we'll see.
We'll see in the final product. We got another regional matchup here. 3 Kaiser taking on 13 St. Thomas. This one is going to be crazy with how St. Thomas looks right now. And Kaiser, very battle tested squad this year. They do a lot of good things on both sides of the ball. I don't. This one's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, that is gonna be good, dude. That's gonna be solid.
Yeah, it just means more in the sun. That's what they always say.
Okay, so, I actually played against the Kaiser quarterback, Bryce Beasley, I do believe his name is.
Oh yeah, okay.
So he was at West Bloomfield when I was playing at Lake Orion, downstate Michigan. Originally went to Bowling Green out of high school, and then found his way, which is in the MAC Division I for those who aren't familiar. Yeah. But then found his way over at Kaiser. Did not realize that until we were covering them earlier this season, and I'm looking at him like, man, like that name sounds familiar. I'm a sophomore playing defensive end at like 175 pounds. Their left tackle, who I think went on to play at Central Michigan, was like 6'6", 315. I remember I get by this dude one time. Finally, put a little speed rush move on him. I'm going to get this man in the backfield. Beasley is like a good 6'4", 6'5". He's tall. Big guy. Big guy. Throws it right over me. Was not even phased. It's been a minute. I've seen the dude play. He's a dog. He's certainly led this Kaiser offense to be incredibly potent on the NAIA scene.
Absolutely.
A little personal anecdote for you there, man.
Yeah. No, I love that, dude. Yeah. I love that connection. I love hearing that. But yeah, that's a scary dude you got to deal with, and Kaiser's got some other scary dudes. But, St. Thomas has the benefit right now of also being a scary team. So we'll see for that one. The Battle on the Beach, I guess you could call it.
Hell yeah.
That should be the name. If it's not, by the way, we
That's
got to
sick.
fix
That'd
that.
be sick.
Um, but yeah, we get to see another Baker takes on another orange team. Just a bunch of orange flying around on that field. They take on fourth seeded Georgetown. Baker is the 15 seed there.
Mhm.
Whew. Georgetown. That's another team you talk about. They look scary right now. Baker,
Yeah.
obviously a bit more battle tested with their first round game, but they're gonna have to battle again in this one.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And a team that I've been looking at too, not to move on from this one too quickly, but you talk
Mhm.
about next up, this Indiana Wesleyan team that, we talked a lot about the success they've had this year. They've had some really big statement wins. You talk about teams like Taylor, like St. Francis, most recently that huge win over Marion. That was our game of the week selection just a few weeks back. But most recently, they have that loss to Concordia to finish out the year. And that's probably the worst timing for this team. You don't want to back into the playoffs like that. The
Mhm.
momentum and those kind of things are very real. So for them and this matchup here against Morningside, a team that to their standards has underperformed, do you see this potentially being a really close matchup, even though it is a 6 versus a 10 seed?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that I don't know. These two teams, like I'm really excited for this one because basically you get to watch Morningside's offense and how potent it is take on India Wesleyan's defense, who's one of the best in the country. It's a
Yep.
fantastic matchup. I just think like Morningside is not dead until they are literally dead. You
No.
know, like this is even at a low point, which being the 10th seed in the playoff, like, okay, that's insane that that's your low point. Um, but I'll believe it when I see it. You know, I just I refuse to be too against this Morningside team. And they, Indiana Wesleyan has to plan against two different quarterbacks, two different styles of
Yes.
play. Lennox Brown is extremely versatile. Um, it's just going to be interesting to see what they do with what's thrown at them.
Yeah, and we've talked about too, like the standards are so high for that Mustangs team. Like you have
Mhm.
obviously the blemish at Northwestern, the number one team in the country on the road in a freaking blizzard that we saw, and then the uncharacteristic upset, the Dort game that we certainly talked about. The fact that those losses were back to back is definitely worrying, and not the way that they maybe should have and could have responded after that Northwestern game, but the
Mhm.
rest of their resume schedule, if you will, has a lot of really good teams. This is still a team that went into Benedictine and in week one, the number 7 team in the country, and upset them at their place. Has some quality wins over squads like Jamestown. Absolutely handled your boys over at D Dub, which was
Yeah,
a tough one. But
that's a tough
like you
one.
said, the fact that the 10 seed in the playoff is a low point for them is something else, and certainly feels like their style of play of football could travel very well too.
Oh, absolutely. Always does. Always
Yeah.
does.
Good stuff, man. We got what, two other ones here. This Bethel squad's obviously been an exciting one.
Oh man, I've been talking about NAIA football long enough to have a narrative to push here with Bethel, Tennessee. I feel like these are my guys, you know. I've been hyping them up all season, but like the SP plus numbers, man, this is a fourth ranked offense, the best defense in the entire country.
Okay.
This is a scary Bethel team right now. And obviously, Evangel, who's been quietly on the come up, they have a lot of things going for them. They're undefeated. And guys like Dylan Hester really contributing to a fantastic, balanced approach to the game and very strong defensively, too, especially. So this is going to be a fun one. This is going to be a really fun matchup.
Yeah, and I think Evangelo is kind of on the other side. We talk about an IDub versus these guys. They're coming into this with all the momentum in the world. Three of their
Yeah.
last four wins coming against some really quality teams in a squad like Friends. Then you go Southwestern and Bethel, and they've been able to close out what have been really close games. These last four games, their largest margin of victory looks like it was 9 points. So yeah, one part of you could play devil's advocate and say, oh, they were that close to losing every single one of these games. But the other side of me is like, this is a team that knows how to close out close games, and they've done it in a really good fashion, double overtime, even if it needs to go that far at home against Bethel, excuse me, for the KCAC. So, lot of good things. A lot of good things you've said about this Evangel squad.
Yeah, as a Washington Husky fan, I can currently
Yeah.
attest to, these close wins,
Yeah.
feeling like they're more positive than negative.
Right.
Obviously, I'm a bit biased there. You could easily make the case that it's tough to almost lose these games. But if you keep finding ways to win, does it really matter? Does it really matter how it gets done? Right? Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So this is going to be a great matchup. Evangel has a lot to prove, and Bethel honestly can establish themselves going further into the playoffs. So.
Yeah, man. And then you do have one of those more regional kind of, maybe a little bit more regional kind of matchups, if you will.
The Frontier is just the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah,
because I could not believe that we see a rematch of these two teams. I believe the margin of victory they played the first time was like 3 points or something stupid like that. This is an on-fire Montana Western team who's looked really good recently, but College of Idaho has put together a very solid season and has just barely started to slip up. But obviously them, being the way that they are, they'll be fine. So we'll see.
Absolutely. And again, the loss at Southern Oregon is a tough one to stomach for them to close out the year. Yeah. We talk about momentum. It's obviously very important. They won at home against Montana Western by only 2. It was that close, 37-35 against the Bulldogs there early. That was back in September, which is crazy. To think about that matchup was that far. But, it's a good point, though, because your team in September looks so much different than your team in mid to late November. Like, there are so many things that transpire, good and bad, by the way. Like, you have a lot of growth that happens between your squad, but then you have the obvious injury bug usually will hit a lot of teams, and other things might not go the way that you want. So this could totally be looked at as a very different matchup. There's 2 months of time and pretty good football that separate these two games. So, it's hard to beat the team twice, same team twice. We've seen a lot of guys do it, but certainly would be a feat for those the Yotes, I believe, over there, right?
Yeah, the Yotes. It's going to be a fun matchup, and you're absolutely right. That 2 months that it's been since these teams have played, like a lot changes, and it's hard to beat a team twice, but it doesn't really feel like you're playing the same team when it's been this long.
Yeah.
So it's that's definitely an interesting factor to consider. But this is at Montana Western, so it definitely benefits them this time around.
Yep.
So yeah, it'll be exciting to see. We get a Frontier team guaranteed to go to the quarterfinals, which is always a blast. There's some really good football to be played, so I highly encourage to tune in.
Tap into the viewing, man. Yeah,
have to tap in.
I'm pumped, dude. What's on the cap, by the way? That's a nice little the Rose Bowl.
Oh yeah, big Pac-12 guy. I gotta celebrate because it's the conference is like dying in 2 weeks. So
it's taking his last breaths.
gotta enjoy the joys of the Rose Bowl while I still can.
Yeah, it feels like either you're celebrating it or you're like giving an extra kick while it's down.
Yeah, I'm trying to celebrate. It's gonna be honestly, I might shed a tear after that last Pac-12 After Dark game.
So. That and a little midweek action, man. There's nothing that makes up my week better. My week more than that. That USC team's been kind of all over the place, huh?
Oh, they are
unpredictable.
They're not good. Yeah, I would just say they're not good.
Yeah, I was being benefit of the doubt, but yes. What the hell, man?
Yeah, dude, it's fine. Much better football to watch than USC, anyways. So
yes, no, that's very true. There's much better viewing at all the levels. I should have sent you a video of my setup this weekend. Had like 3 D2 games on the big TV, and then 2 D3 games on my laptop. I got to mix in some NAIA this week. I will.
Absolutely.
I'll get that. Yeah. I'll get that going. That's on me. But sweet, Matt. I appreciate you, brother. As always. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Take it easy.